he can be the first great American conductor.
Welcome to MsMojo, and today we're looking at plot points from Bradley Cooper's Maestro that struck true and false notes regarding the lives of Leonard Bernstein and Felicia Montealegre.
There's a price for being in my brother's orbit, you know that.
There will be a few spoilers. Number 10. Bernstein's conducting debut. Right. Flashing back to Bernstein's youth, the camera focuses on a closed window shade that almost looks like a stage curtain. This foreshadows the call that would change Bernstein's life. Around 9 a.m., the 25-year-old Bernstein learned that conductor Bruno Walter dropped out at the 11th hour due to an illness.
The point of that job was to be always ready to jump in case a conductor, a real conductor of the Philharmonic, that is, Rajinsky, or a guest conductor, got ill.
In need of a substitute, the New York Philharmonic turned to Bernstein, Artur Rajinsky's assistant conductor at the time.
Leonard Bernstein now conducts Schumann's Manfred Overture.
Anyone disappointed by Walter's absence had a change of tune by the end of Bernstein's performance. The fact that this was Bernstein's debut made it all the more impressive when he brought down Carnegie Hall without time to rehearse. The New York Times praised Bernstein the following day, turning him into an overnight sensation.
I'll never forget that experience because it was the most exciting performance to me of the Manfred Overture that I ever played in my life.
Number 9. Bernstein and Montealegre's courtship. Wrong.
She's so beautiful. Tell me about her.
Oh, she's wonderful. She's a lovely girl.
While the film gets much about Bernstein's relationship with Felicia Montealegre right, it glances over details from the early years. Montealegre first saw Bernstein at the New York City Center where she was immediately drawn to him. As the film depicts, the two officially met at a party and got engaged shortly after.
Hello, I'm Lenny.
Hello, Felicia.
However, that engagement didn't even last a year. With both agreeing that they weren't ready for marriage, Montealegre entered a relationship with fellow actor Richard Hart. The two remained together for nearly 5 years until a coronary occlusion claimed Hart's life at age 35. Almost 9 months after Hart died, Montealegre married Bernstein.
Marriage is the experience of all time, he later wrote, and reveals more to me about myself than anything else ever has. It is sometimes hard, given my peculiar problems, but Felicia is wonderful.
Hart doesn't play a prominent role in Maestro, which jumps from Bernstein and Montealegre's flourishing romance to married life. Number 8. Bernstein's sexuality. Right. As is the case with many historical LGBTQIA+ figures, Bernstein never went on the record explicitly defining his sexuality. Some scholars believe he was bisexual. Other historians and those who knew Bernstein say he was gay, despite being married to a woman. Even Montealegre described her husband as gay in a letter that read, quote, "You don't admit to the possibility of a double life, but if your peace of mind, your health, your whole nervous system depend on a certain sexual pattern, what can you do?"
I think there's no question but that Felicia knew when she and Lenny got married that Lenny had questions about his sexuality. But they decided that they loved one another so much that they really couldn't do without one another, and they had to at least give it a good shot.
Without putting a label on it, Maestro authentically captures how Bernstein became romantically involved with men and women. The film also emphasizes that Montealegre knew who Bernstein was even before they got married.
I know exactly who you are.
Number 7. Bernstein discussed rumors with his daughter. Right. Although Bernstein and Montealegre had evident marriage problems, they hid the relationship's dark side from their children. While the children didn't see their parents fight, they sensed tension beneath the surface. Eldest child Jamie started to see the cracks as a teenager, working at the Tanglewood Summer Music Festival where Bernstein conducted. As others talked about her father's relationships with men, Jamie became confused. In her memoir, Jamie reflected, quote, "My own existence seemed living proof that the story was not a simple one." In the film, Bernstein takes his daughter outside, assuring her that these rumors aren't accurate. This is essentially how the conversation played out in reality. Despite still suspecting the truth, Jamie wouldn't bring up Bernstein's sexuality to her father or mother again.
Obviously, they had a tremendously complicated relationship, which was full of questions and unresolved issues. What was clear from the get-go for me was that they were mad about each other.
Number 6. Bernstein was content with his double life. Wrong.
He has both an endless number of friends and intellectual interests. From very early on, he fascinates all who meet him.
Maestro portrays Bernstein as a private individual, although his attraction to men is something of an open secret. While remorseful towards Montealegre, Bernstein shows no signs of wanting to give up men for her.
There was some part of him that needed to have that sort of middle-class sensibility, normal thing. He really needed to have that over here so that he could be however else he was over there.
The film omits one of the more unsettling chapters of Bernstein's life in which he wrestled with his sexual identity. For roughly 5 years, Bernstein met with analyst Marketa Morris, whom he referred to as the Frau. Bernstein attended therapy under the impression that he could be, quote, cured. He wasn't the only one who had been misinformed about how sexuality works. After marrying Bernstein, Montealegre wrote to him, quote, "I happen to love you very much. This may be a disease, and if it is, what better cure?"
It is sometimes hard, given my peculiar problems, but Felicia is wonderful.
Number 5. Bernstein was encouraged to hide his Judaism. Right. Bernstein could be secretive about his sexuality, but he chose not to conceal his Jewish roots. At the time, some saw this as a potential risk to his career.
You see, his tradition was that a musician in the Russian Jewish ghetto, where he came from, after all, till he was 16 he lived in such a ghetto. A musician was among the lowest orders of being.
Even after World War II ended, Bernstein's Jewish mentor Sergei Koussevitzky suggested that he adopt another surname as a performance in Munich approached. Koussevitzky feared that anti-Semitism would block Bernstein's rise to success, suggesting that he go by Leonard Burns.
He said, "You know, it is very difficult in this world for a Jewish boy. And Leonard Bernstein, it will never be on Carnegie Hall, the poster Leonard Bernstein."
Upon briefly considering a name change, he concluded, quote, "I'll do it as Bernstein or not at all." Bernstein's Jewish heritage ultimately wasn't a detriment to his public image, reflecting the changing times. Montealegre also embraced Judaism. Although her grandfather was Jewish, she was brought up Catholic, converting to Judaism after marrying Bernstein.
It was, as he wrote his family, a marriage contracted in insecurity. Yet the bonds they forged surpassed all misgivings.
Number 4. Bernstein's shooter story. Right. Sharing an intimate moment with Felicia, Leonard reminisces about a shocking incident from his school days. Bernstein claims that while attending the Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia, an unstable student armed himself with a pistol and plotted to shoot him. The motivation? Jealousy. This account is true, but Bernstein wasn't the only intended target. The gunman also sought to shoot Randall Thompson and Fritz Reiner, both of whom instructed Bernstein during his time at Curtis. Fortunately, the authorities apprehended the gun-wielding student before anyone was harmed. While Bernstein had been lonely at Curtis, this opened his eyes to just how much some of the other students disliked him. Apparently, there was a group of anti-Bernsteinians, although he gained more friends after this near-death experience. Number 3. Bernstein's relationship with Tom Cine. Right. While Bernstein had more than a few affairs, Maestro primarily focuses on his relationship with San Francisco music director Tom Cine, who assisted with his Norton lectures at Harvard. It was obvious to Bernstein's family that Cine was more than just a colleague. Of all the lovers that came into Bernstein's life, Cine perhaps put the greatest strain on his marriage. Over the course of 5 years, Montealegre felt as if Cine had replaced her as Bernstein's closest friend and confidant. Her worst fears were confirmed when Bernstein moved to California with Cine. Bernstein returned to Montealegre shortly after, marking an end to his romance with Cine. They nonetheless stayed friends until AIDS took Cine's life in 1987, while Bernstein died 3 years later.
Are you itching to move?
No, I'm not.
Good.
Number 2. Bernstein only had affairs with men. Wrong. As the film suggests, Bernstein's lovers were predominantly male, while Montealegre was the most important woman in his life by a wide margin. That said, Bernstein also had affairs with women.
I love people so much that it's hard for me to be alone. That music, it keeps me glued to life.
Although it's briefly mentioned that Bernstein has slept with more than one woman, he's only seen committing adultery with men. Just as the real Montealegre knew about her husband's attraction to men, she was well aware of his liaisons with ladies throughout their marriage.
It was difficult for her to accept his homosexuality, and he knew it. And I said to her, if you love him, you accept it all.
Some might argue that this confirms Bernstein was bisexual. After Montealegre died, though, Bernstein was almost exclusively seen with men until the day he died. However Bernstein would have identified, it's clear that no other woman ever made him feel the same way that Montealegre did.
If summer doesn't sing in you, then nothing sings in you.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Number 1. Cancer brought Bernstein and Montealegre back together. Right. Bernstein's time with Catherine in California barely lasted a year before he returned to Montealegre. It was around this time that she was diagnosed with lung cancer, which she sadly never recovered from. Although Bernstein hadn't been the most faithful husband, he stayed by her side as her illness worsened, even canceling concerts to be with her. Almost a year after being diagnosed, Montealegre passed away at age 56 in 1978.
Mother died in 1978, and he was destroyed, of course, and pretty much did not appear from his room for about 6 months.
Smoking most likely caused the cancer, but Jamie Bernstein couldn't help but feel that her difficult marriage at least partly contributed to Montealegre's death. While Leonard Bernstein lived another 12 years, the guilt remained with him.
After Felicia died, of course, there was this tremendous burden of guilt that he felt, that somehow he was responsible for her death. That was surely something that I don't think he ever resolved.
Bernstein and Montealegre's relationship wasn't easy to define, but as Maestro shows us, it was rooted in love. What did you think of Maestro? Were you familiar with Bernstein and Montealegre before seeing the film? Sound off in the comments.
If summer doesn't sing in you, then nothing sings in you. And if nothing sings in you, then you can't make music.
Do you agree with our picks? Check out this other recent clip from MsMojo. And be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.